What are some NSFW history facts that don't get taught in school? If you ever visit Prague, definitely go to the Sex Machines Museum. I felt so naive of how unaware I was about how horny we as a species have been, since, literally, ever. The steam-powered dildo is a triumph of mechanical engineering. Henry VIII, aside from his 3 legitimate children, had at least 6 other illegitimate kids with various mistresses. There is also a suit of armor made for him on display, and the codpiece alone weighs 1.3 kilograms. President Lyndon Johnson was obsessed with his dick and loved to show it to people. He called it Jumbo. So President Johnson liked to show people the President's Johnson. Queen Victoria instituted a system of certifying prostitutes as syphilis-free. They were called the Queen's Ladies of the Night. Many prostitutes hung the certificate above their beds as a point of pride. James Joyce wrote exceptionally graphic letters to his sew. Early colonizers of the United States used corn cobs as toilet paper. 12-year-old Pocahontas used to entertain white colonists with nude cartwheels. This is actually one of the few things we know about her that's indisputable. During the Age of Sail, any time a large ship would come into port, the men often wouldn't be allowed shore leave for a few days. So you would see small boats packed with prostitutes heading out to the ship at mooring. Larger ships of the line would have over 500 men aboard, so there could definitely be a couple hundred ladies brought aboard behind the captain's back, and with virtually no privacy aboard. You would have spaces in the ship with hundreds of couples going at it at once. There were definitely a lot of captains that didn't allow any women aboard, so the sailors on those ships would just have to wait until they could go ashore. Many children were conceived on the gun deck. Amongst the cannons, they became known as a son of a gun. Benjamin Franklin slept his way through the wives of the French aristocracy, who in return convinced their husbands that supporting the American Revolution was a good idea. Don't know if it's already been said, but Edgar Allan Poe married his 13-year-old cousin when he was very much older than her. Greeks were heavily into sodomy on both sexes. Women were only required to be virgins vaginally prior to marriage. Every other orifice was fair game. The loophole. Archaeologists find lots of poop, and lots of dildos. There was a Greek general who was supposed to lead a major expedition to Sicily. The night before he left, he got wasted and walked around Athens with his other drunk friends and knocked all of the penises off of the statues in Athens. This caused him to be arrested. He missed the expedition and they lost almost all of the men they sent to Sicily because only he knew the plan well enough to pull it off. Alcibiades. He then proceeded to bang the wife of the Persian emperor satrap. Cleopatra did butt stuff. If you look up Edward Russell in history books or even Wikipedia, you learn about his military service, including Admiral of the Royal Fleet for some famous battles. What they don't teach is that he threw a party so epic it's still being talked about 300 years later. In 1694, he threw a party for officers, and with 6,000 guests coming, wanted to make it special. So, he made the world's largest cocktail, drained the garden fountain and used that as a giant punch bowl with hundreds of gallons of liquor, over a half-ton of sugar, thousands of lemons, etc. He hired bartenders to paddle around in boats, scoop it up, and serve it to attendees. At some point, it began to rain, so they put a tent up over the fountain to prevent it getting watered down. About a week after they started, they had drank every last drop. The fountain was dry, and the party was over. Anne Frank's diary talked a lot about masturbation, but most of it was edited out. Here is an excerpt of such a part of the diary. Until I was 11 or 12, I didn't realize there was a second set of labia on the inside, since you couldn't see them. What's even funnier is that I thought urine came out of the clitoris. When you're standing up, all you see from the front is hair. Between your legs there are 2 soft, cushiony things, also covered with hair, which press together when you're standing, so you can't see what's inside. They separate when you sit down and they're very red and quite fleshy on the inside. In the upper part, between the outer labia, there's a fold of skin that, on second thought, looks like a kind of blister. That's the clitoris. This would have given me more information than I got in health class. Alexander the Great had 361 concubines, official prostitutes. 4 more and he would have one for every day of the year. Yeah, but that would be excessive. The creator of the vibrator was George Taylor. It was originally made as a steam-powered device that was used to cure a disease called hysteria, by massaging the pelvic region. Empress Wu Tse of China asserted her dominance over male officials by making them kneel before her and pleasure her orally. For a long time royal European women gave birth in front of spectators, who would pour into the bedchambers to watch the babies arrive. Plymouth Colony of British North America, New England convicted and hung a young man committing bestiality. It was one of the first hangings in the New World. The 16-year-old Thomas Granger was hanged to death for indulging in buggery with a mare, a cow, 2 goats, many sheep, 2 calves, an ostrich allegedly, and a turkey as mentioned in the court report from 1642. His hangman was one John Holmes. Nelson Rockefeller, former vice president of USA, suffered a heart attack and died while having sex with his 22-year-old assistant. He was 70. Napoleon would ask that his wife, Josephine, not bathe for several days when he knew he would be coming home. "My man's liked a stinky lady." On a lighter note, after she died he kept a clipping from her flower garden in a locket on his person until the day he died. The point here is you go to both extremes if you really love someone. Ben Franklin was a super sex freak and loved to tell younger dudes to have sex with older women. Ben Franklin was the original MILF hunter. In late imperial China, a concubine earmarked for sex by the emperor later at night would be pampered all day. When the night of the deed came, the palace servants stripped the girl naked, wrapped her in a silk blanket, and carried her to the emperor's bed to unwrap her there. This practice wasn't for Imperial Majesty's kinks. It was a security measure. Sometime earlier a concubine tried to assassinate an emperor during sex with weapons hidden in her clothing. Not necessarily NSFW, but pirates were one of the first people to have a health care plan of sorts. If you lost an appendage, there was a predetermined pay for everything that was lost or maimed. Also, there was a pretty large number of female pirates. For a time when women had little to no value in the workplace, they more or less had equal treatment and pay to other pirates. The loss of a limb payment is depicted in the Errol Flynn movie, Captain Blood. The one-legged pirate receiving the GB Gold is played by my grandfather. His leg was machine-gunned off on the 11th of November 1918, moved the family to Hollywood and was an extra for many years. In any history course, the rampant raping done by most occupying forces around the world, e.g., Japan in WW2. Pretty much every town, village, city that was invaded from the time of the earliest civilizations. It's been like this. Still happens today. Outside of modern professional fighting forces, raping and looting was always accepted as the best perk of being a soldier. Always thought the best perk was sleight of hand. The Coolidge effect is named for the 30th President of the United States, Calvin Coolidge. It is an observed phenomenon in nature that a male presented with new, receptive sexual partners exhibits renewed sexual interest and ability even after intercourse with prior but still available sexual partners. The story goes, the President and Mrs. Coolidge were being shown separately around an experimental government farm. When Mrs. Coolidge came to the chicken yard, she noticed that a rooster was mating very frequently. She asked the attendant how often that happened and was told, dozens of times each day. Mrs. Coolidge said, "Tell that to the President when he comes by." Upon being told, the President asked, "Same hen every time?" The reply was, "Oh, no, Mr. President, a different hen every time." President, "Tell that to Mrs. Coolidge." The political smear campaign against Marie Antoinette involved a lot of dicks. The first person who was sentenced to the electric chair died horribly. Someone forgot to wet an essential part of the machine and he ended up with bubbling skin, melting eyes and a foaming mouth among other things. The amount of electricity was so strong that he began to convulse violently, so much so that he weakened straps. He twitched so erratically that his index finger dug through the palm of his hand. The entire room smelled of burning flesh. and the stench even permeated some clothes. Many people who came to see had fainted during the execution. But do you know what's even more horrible? They heard him wheezing after they turned the electricity off. At the Battle of Agincourt, most of the English archers fought pantsless because they had serious diarrhea and were literally shitting themselves as they fought. They won too. To save ammunition, the Khmer Rouge started to execute people with pickaxes in the killing fields. French President Félix Faure went out via death by blowjob from a mistress. If you die while nutting, you are both coming and going. Roman brothels had pictures of the prostitute specialties above the door to their room. We'll hold you while you cry. The inventor of the bra had a pet whippet named Clitoris. The core of Discovery only ate meat and had incredible constipation. One day they all ate pills they named Thunderclappers, which made them shit out everything immediately. But the pills had mercury in them, so if you go out on the same trail as the core of Discovery with a metal detector, you can find the exact place. Lewis, Clark and the rest of the core took the biggest shits of their lives. Ancient Greece society was all about butt sex. It gets glossed over or referred to in a passing and vague way. In fact, part of the curriculum of well-off kids, from fancy Athenians to tough Spartans, was being poked from behind by your teacher, tutor. Child grooming was more or less systemic, a necessary step in life for most men. Powdered wigs were invented to cover up head sores caused by syphilis. Syphilis also eventually destroys your nose, which is why old-timey writing frequently refers to how prominent a person's nose is while expounding on their moral character. Essentially, this guy is super great. He doesn't even have syphilis. Helen Palmer, the wife of famed author Dr. Seuss, was an excellent writer in her own right, though she is perhaps best known for her tragic suicide. Seuss had frequent affairs while Palmer was a faithful spouse and truly loved her husband. Seuss was absent through much of the turbulent part of her life, which was caused by disease including a battle with cancer. Her suicide note included this passage: "Dear Ted, what has happened to us? I don't know. I feel myself in a spiral, going down down down, into a black hole from which there is no escape, no brightness, and loud in my ears from every side I hear, failure, failure, failure. I love you so much. I am too old and enmeshed in everything you do and are, that I cannot conceive of life without you. My going will leave quite a rumor, but you can say I was overworked and overwrought. Your reputation with your friends and fans will not be harmed. Sometimes think of the fun we had all through the years." Seuss would later say that Palmer's suicide made him feel worthless, which he admitted was more than deserved. Nevertheless, he married the very woman he was having an affair with. The German army was given methamphetamines during their invasion of France, Belgium, Netherlands in 1940. This was the other part of Blitzkrieg that isn't really talked about. For the first 3 days the German army advanced without rest. No stopping or sleeping for 3 days straight. If you got tired, they just gave you more meth. The drug may have also played a role in why the Panzer divisions refused to stop even after being ordered to several times by high command. They only finally stopped advancing when Hitler personally ordered the halt. In the 12th century, a philosopher named Peter Abelard challenged the church teaching on sexual morality, pointing out that no ceremony of man could make an inherently immoral act moral. The act would have to be already generally moral. Therefore, sex before marriage really couldn't be considered a mortal sin. He fell in love with the wrong woman and had his nuts cut off. This made him angry and sad. He then wrote a book. D. João Vai, former king of Portugal, had a royal masturbator. Ah yes, the hand of the king. Hedy Lamarr, she was first motion picture to include a nude scene ecstasy and have her orgasm. Later, she went on to invent frequency hopping, which eventually became CDMA and Wi-Fi, so her impact on sex and technology has shown her to be a true revolutionary with a long-standing impact. According to Christianity, Jesus ascended to heaven, hence you might think that, according to Christianity, no body part of him should be found in earth. However, this does not include Jesus's foreskin, as Jesus wasn't born as Jewish. He was circumcised 8 days after birth. Hence, when Jesus supposedly ascended to heaven, his foreskin, known as the Holy Prepush or the Holy Foreskin, remained in earth. Throughout the centuries, several churches claimed that they have the original Holy Foreskin, even several at the same time. Catherine the Great had a parlor room filled with explicit, erotic furniture she commissioned personally. Were talking blow jobs carved into chairs, an end table where giant dicks torrential cum shots were holding up a marble countertop, a woman getting eaten out by a demon on a throne. Homegirl had taste. The father of microbiology, Antony van Leeuwenhoek, was the first to examine semen under a microscope immediately after ejaculating in his wife. The daddy of microbiology. Newton was so dedicated to his work and abhorred fun so much that many people believe he died a virgin at 87 years old. And by work I don't mean revolutionizing physics and inventing calculus. I mean alchemy. His main focus was turning lead into gold and making the Philosopher's Stone. I think Newton is a very good example of someone in history who probably had autism, before autism had the name. Cleopatra was nicknamed Regina Meretrix, the Queen of the Whores. High-class whores though, not slum prostitutes. There is a distinction in Latin. Jenny Wade was a prostitute and a madam. She wasn't a kind and generous soul who was treating the wounded from both sides of the Battle of Gettysburg. She was offering her services to both sides. When you take the bus tour with recorded audio, the storyteller narrating the tour is supposed an old-timer reflecting on the battle. When you pass the Jenny Wade house still standing, he says something like, "That's the Jenny Wade house. Jenny was a friend of mine. She was a friend to many." I always liked that subtle nod.